Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host Matthew Head, and in this episode I'm talking to Dr. Chris Arnold. He's the founder of Dyversity Lab, a global collective of high achievers and diverse thinkers using the power of diverse thinking to solve problems. He has a background in advertising, brand management and ethical marketing, and formerly has been brand director and creative director of Saatchi & Saatchi. I'll put links to Dyversity Lab, his program Think Like a Dyslexic, and other things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to dive in, unlike for me, at the sort of deep end and kind of find out what your dyslexia story is. At what point in your life did you start feeling sort of inkling of being dyslexic?
Well, I think it breaks into two big chapters. There's the first bit before you know you're dyslexic, so that's probably what they call BD, before dyslexia. And then there's AD, which is after you know you're dyslexic. And I think there's a good way of I had someone use that phrase recently. I thought, I'm going to have to adopt that. It's so good.
Yeah, I might have to steal it.
So in my BD days, I certainly knew when I was at school that I wasn't like anybody else, probably for several reasons, because I'm also ADHD. So
yes.
Most energetic. I was always the most creative. I was always thinking of ways of doing things and analysing things and challenging the teachers, and sometimes saying, we'd be doing a history lesson, and I'd say, yeah, but that's not the cleverest way of doing it. Surely you should have done it that way. And they would just shut up and listen. And I wasn't very good at reading and writing. My two brothers were good at reading and writing. My older brother's a bit of a genius, but in an academic way. So that was my bar I'd compare to. So what's wrong with you? It's this phrase that came out all the time, is what's wrong with you? Why do you like shape of the family? And I got held down a year at primary school, which is very demoralizing. And I think the interesting lesson from this is that you become a winner or loser, you might say, a fighter, or you give in. And I'm a fighter, so I wasn't going to have this. So I fought my way back up and got back into my year, which is very hard because you've got to sort of jump on this too. I luckily I've had a good support teacher. And I knew that I was good at certain things. I knew I was a good thinker. I knew good at solving problems. If there was any problem, I could solve it with 3 or 4 ways. I knew I was very creative, and I knew I had a brain that, turned at about 1,000 miles an hour. But there's always this constant, what's wrong with you? And I remember there's a case where I was at school and the headmaster came in and said, "Where's Arnold?" And I went, "Up here." I thought, "Oh dear, what am I going to get told off about this time?" And he said, "I believe you're our most creative person in the school." And I go, "Okay, that sounds good." Praise. Yeah. And he said, "I've got a job for you." I go, "Yes." So I go outside. He takes me to the playground. He gives me this white coat to put on, so I look like a lab technician, thinking, "What is this?" And then he gives me a bucket of paint and a brush and says, "Can you repaint the hopscotch?"
Now that's cool.
It was a bit of a case to go, what the?
Yeah.
I really was like saying, really, that's what you decide as being creative? It did actually open my eyes. I thought, this seriously is what some people think creativity is, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, you've got to think about what colours to put the numbers and everything. Yeah.
What numbers? Painting them all in the wrong order. So I repainted it all, which was a way of getting out of lessons anyway. But so I knew my reading and writing wasn't great, but I improved on that. And then I have to say, modern day, thank God for spell checker. So I got on to public school, which is a bit more brutal because it is quite disciplined. So I was a boarder. So for 5 years, it was quite tough. I found a lot of solace in playing guitar, which is good because that's something I liked because I did lessons, but I didn't really like the lessons because I thought it was a bit too, well, as I would say now, neuralinear. So I used to spend hours in the practice rooms at night when they're empty, just jamming along to various musicians and exploring. And then I sort of left school, didn't do too well. I had to retake all my English O levels, which then went to North London, did maths, which I was good at, and I did economics, which I didn't agree with. I did
okay.
I didn't agree. I mean, a lot of the economic policies I go, seriously, why did I think of doing it this way and that way? Anyway, so that wasn't apparently the way to get full marks. So I then went on to art college.
Yeah, I can see
that. Having failed both my A-level maths and my A-level economics, I was good at both. I just wasn't suited to the examination. I got my art and I went on to Arnold College of Art, which was not the great college it was at the day. It was really just a part of Middlesex Poly. And it was just the venue, really. But there had been a great art college in its day. So I was quite proud to be there. And I then went on to, I wanted to do interior design because I didn't know anything else. And then I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up doing advertising. And it was after, I was actually my first couple of years of advertising, and we picked up this charity called the Dyslexia Institute.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was this competition to do the best charity ad in the Reader's Digest. And someone said, well, why don't you have a little competition and see who can come up with the best ad? So I was working with a guy called Toby Talbot at the time. And we did the best ad. It was a pen shaped like a snake. And we related that to what it was like to be dyslexic. Picking up a pen was really scary. And anyway, it got selected.
Oh, I see. So that it's the snake being the predator, that you don't want to go touch it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's symbolic, really. And we had this very moving story we'd found about a dyslexic kid saying he hated picking up the pen. He had a phobia about pens. And it ended up winning loads of awards. And for us, it was our first big award winners, actually. Fantastic ad. But while I was down at the charity, I was sitting there with a guy called Sir Harry Chasty, who was the CEO of the charity. He was looking over my shoulder as I was writing notes, and he goes, "You never told us you're dyslexic." And I looked at him.
What do you mean?
And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." So we sat down and had a conversation. And I think at this point, you just got to the point where you got through life where you've got lots of strategies to make do.
Yeah,
so when you're in a situation which is very linear or process driven, you'd find strategies. I think it's why we're often quite strategic thinkers, because we were constantly having to, how do I get out of reading? I've got a cough today. So, and he said we did the test, and I came out as dyslexic, which is great. And I came out in the middle area because there's sort of severely mild and the middle area, which is where the entrepreneurs all are, which is quite good. And also, I had been diagnosed at school as hyperactive, so that later became an ADHD definition. So putting the two together, I thought, well, actually, instead of being embarrassed about this, I'm going to scream about it. So I thought, my mate had just come out because he was gay. So he said, why didn't you come out? Whatever you come out of, I don't know, because you come out of the closet, I don't know what you come out of, probably kitchen cupboard. So I
the stationery cupboard.
Yeah, we come out of the library. So I said, why don't we change the phrase to coming up rather than coming out? So I came up. And I proudly, when we launched the ad that we just done, I then made a big notice that I was dyslexic, and that sort of added a lot to the hype.
Nice.
I then did a thing with Creative Review where we started looking at how many dyslexics are there in the ad industry. And what I found very quickly for about a year, it's like a moth and light bulb. All these people kept coming to me and ringing me up saying, I'm dyslexic. And in the end, this film director rang me up and said, I'm dyslexic. Do you want to make a commercial? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So we made this fantastic commercial. That again won a load of awards. We then had to, where do we run it? And then we found out there was a head of cinema chain, and he was dyslexic, and his son was dyslexic, and so he ran it for free. And the sound was provided by someone who was dyslexic. And the whole thing was done by dyslexic people. And it was quite amazing. So I realized that the industry was just full of dyslexic people. Yeah, and you can understand why, because in the creative industry, we're about talent, not about CVs, we're not about badges, we're not about labels, we're not about certificates, we're about talent. And I always use the phrase now, I'm lecturing in schools, see the talent, not the label.
Yes.
And so that was kind of my going from my BD to my AD. And I embraced it. And so I'd tell everybody I'm dyslexic. I said, I'm bloody good at this, but I'm not. So don't give me the finances to do, because I'm not very good at that. I don't do expenses, and I don't do spreadsheets. But hell, if you need a problem solving, I'm your man.
So in your, to use your lexicon, AD days, is that when you'd gone to university and all that kind of stuff, or you just completely dropped out of education?
No, I went to art college.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was fine, because there again, it was all about just being creative. Although I did 4 years of interior design, which is it's kind of interior architecture, it was okay. It wasn't really great. I tended to enjoy more the other subjects. So for example, I did a model on propaganda, and I did on the psychology of creativity and psychology of colour, which I found quite fascinating, because I've got a deep fascination with psychology. At the time, my brother was studying psychology at Cardiff, so I just read all his books. So I sort of co-studied with him, really. And it's very good because in marketing and many other arts and business applications, psychology is really, really important. And we've always embraced it a lot. We're probably one of the leading agencies in embracing psychological models, like NLP, Enneagrams, and many others. But I find it useful because I think a lot of us are trying to understand how our brains work, because nobody else does.
Trying to figure it through. And Did you find that once you'd realised you were dyslexic, apart from making connections in your professional life and the advertising marketing, was there anything you tried to do then to get extra help for it, like use any tools or what was available at the time? Because you're already out in the workforce by that point. So like most people who spoke to at university, they get help that way. But
I think it was a bit of an opposite, really. I didn't feel that I being both, some people with ADHD do seem to tranquilize themselves. And I've never actually, I actually quite like the hyper on speed mentality. You think we're on drugs in advertising. I'm not necessarily on drugs, it's just ADHD. But a lot of people thought I was on cocaine most days of the week.
Okay.
I don't think if I took cocaine it would make any difference, honestly.
You're already flat out, right?
Yeah. And, someone said, what's the disadvantage of being hyperactive? I said, you die younger, but you live longer. I said, how's that work? Because you sleep only 4 hours a night. So in fact, technically speaking, you've probably clocked up more hours in your lifetime than a non-ADHD person.
It's not the age, it's the mileage, yeah.
So I thought, no, I didn't seek any compensation for it. I mean, I think, thank God for spelling. My mother was very good at correcting things. All my essays I wrote at college, I'd give to my mother and she'd correct all the spelling and some of the grammar. Although, interestingly enough, dyslexics are actually very good writers. They're just not very good at the technique of, getting the spelling right. But most of them are actually quite good at stringing. They're quite good storytellers.
Yes.
And, you take Agatha Christie, for example, who's dyslexic.
Yes.
Someone said actually Stephen King is as well. I don't know. But there's a lot of very top writers who've been dyslexic. They're great storytellers. But, there's always someone else who'll do the English. And of course, now we have Grammarly and we have spell checker. It's almost not a problem. I think the thing I had to be very careful of is headlines when we were doing headlines. And, I'd be working with a writer. And sometimes I wrote the headlines, sometimes he did. But then I'd be responsible for, overlooking the art direction of it. And sometimes I would not notice that there was a spelling mistake. And you'd be amazed at how an advert with a spelling mistake in, despite being seen by a dozen people, nobody spots it.
Yes, it's surprising, isn't it? Because yes, the person who made the advert probably should spell check it. It probably has, but it does surprise me how many you do see stuff like how many people did this get approved by on the process to coming out to in front of the eyeballs of the general public.
We had one case of a syndrome which is identified by a French psychologist. We'd done this ad for travel, and it was a tall adaptation, and so it was tall and thin, and basically went sort of you will find. The best looking birds on our beaches. And it was for a Danish tourist board. Of course, it was all seagulls.
I see.
And the on had appeared at the end of the sentence, the beginning of the next sentence. Now, a French psychologist had noticed this, that nobody actually often notices this, and they sure didn't until it appeared in an award ceremony as an award winner, and it was about 20 foot high. At which point you do notice it. Oh my God! There's a typo. And everybody in this room is seeing it. And later on, I thought it was quite fascinating. So what did I used it later on, that technique, in a poster. And the poster was something like, if you cannot see the 8 things wrong with this poster, then you might be dyslexic.
Oh,
not you know how it feels. And we used at the end, and that was like 6 of them. And then the other two was blatantly obvious. You give people 2 obvious ones to find, like a clock backwards and stuff. And people would sit there at the poster and go, what's wrong with this poster? What's wrong with the poster? I can't see what's wrong. And they got really frustrated. And the whole thing was, this is what it feels like, It was a very effective poster. So sometimes you turn things to your advantage. And I think that's the one thing you see a lot among dyslexics, and why I've hired so many, is the ability to join the dots. This idea that, people describe dyslexia as dimensional thinking. That we think in 3 dimensions, when most people think, especially neurotypical, in 2 dimensions. And therefore our ability to make those links, because we're not linked on a 2-dimensional plane, we're in 3D, we can actually link things in a way that others can't, which is why we're good at pattern recognition and problem solving. And, entrepreneurism is often about connecting the dots. And also, when there are problems to be solved, you're seeing it in 3 dimensions. And I do a training course called Dimensional Thinking, which helps 2D people think 3D, more so they can understand it and try and be creatives.
Yes, and it's interesting you're saying about the advertising and lots of dyslexics in advertising, because I've interviewed quite a few people in marketing for this podcast, and I guess it is the 3D thinking and creativity of it. But it sounds like you may have walked through quite a lot of your advertising career, finding fellow dyslexics and then working together to get them through. How do you find them all? It seems like your career has gone to great heights off the back of it as well.
Well, I guess I got to be creative director at Starting Science, which is not bad, really. Out of my own agency.
Doing all right at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Not many are getting rich at the moment in advertising, but that's the nature of the economy. I would say the part of things I enjoy. I love it. It's great fun. I love solving problems. I love thinking. I love, being creative. From that point of view, it's great. I think the irony is that in a way, it's like attracts like, because when you're interviewing people, I've always said the classic would be you'd get a headhunter rings you up and says, I hear you're looking for a team, let me send you some CVs over. And I go, I'm not interested in the CVs. Why not? I said, what does it matter? I don't care where they come from. I don't care what they've done. It doesn't matter if they've been a top agency or a bad agency. I just want to know how they think. So I'd say, show me the books that are a bit quirky and unusual. And, in advertising, you will get the mainstream people, you see a lot of them, they've got a good award-winning BMW and an economist, but they're all kind of what I call straight creative. They're almost advertising creative. I'm looking for the guy or gal who does something a little bit odd. Often, the one who didn't actually get a first at college as well, because they usually didn't follow the system. And you see the book and you go, that's the book I'm going to hire. 9 times out of 10, they're dyslexic.
Yeah, you just sort of see the resonance.
It just sort of resonates with you. You just sort of connect. And so when we started Creative Orchestra, which originally started as a very quirky agency with a new model, we'd originally tried to get WPP to fund it. And I remember sending an invite to Martin Sorrell saying, I invite you to £1 million lunch. If you like my proposition, by the end of it, you'll not only buy lunch, but you'll give me £1 million to invest in the business. If you don't like it, I'll pay for lunch. And it was a great PR stunt. And he actually accepted it first time round. They kept bouncing, and eventually he bottled it. And one of mine said, you never would have got the money anyway. But we then saw Mark, who was his deputy, who's now head of WPP, and the guy just said, well, when you're big enough, we'll buy you. And that really annoyed me, that, because I thought, I don't sell for any price if I don't want to. And we actually then started Creative Orchestra up, not only as this very weird mix of creativity, because we had lots of different disciplines. So we had architects, fashion designers, filmmakers, animators, almost everything, and a few ad people. But we decided to set up as a not-for-profit. And everyone thought, you're going to be balmy. Who sets up an agency as a not-for-profit? It's like a not-for-profit bank. We said, no, we want to do it. So our first 2 years, we wanted to be not driven by profit, but driven by values and ethos. And it created an amazing, I would say still, I've worked in a lot of top creative agencies, but still one of the most amazing creative environments. And it was really, really good. And having all these different thinkers from different disciplines also showed me that how, when you brief somebody, the approach to a brief is very different if you're a product designer or a fashion designer or an ad person. So we discovered they were all taught in different ways. So from that, we learned a lot about different methodologies of thinking and briefing. And we had basically 3 different briefs that we could brief our teams on that would actually get them to come up with 3 very different solutions. And we practiced a lot of that. And it became a real creative experiment, actually. And we cultivated a lot of young talent. And I think over the years, we've had about 200 young people come through us and go on to better jobs. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's essentially we sort of ran as an incubation for a lot of young people. At the beginning, it was very fun. But we started then winning serious business, which hadn't been the aim. It's like the idea of being the mercenary creative people who go in and work with other companies and just sort of pick up briefs. And suddenly, we landed a bit of IKEA, we landed a bit of this, and we landed this product.
I see, yeah.
And we started getting serious grown-up accounts. And there was a point where someone said, advisor came and said, you're going to have to grow up, guys. It's like a kid's playground in this place at the moment. It's just crazy and fun, but you're going to have to grow up. And we did. But I've always maintained the dyslexia. So as part of that story, the next chapter was that we got clients coming to us asking us to solve problems that were not solvable through a marketing. We'd say, well, look, that's not a marketing problem. And therefore, it doesn't require a marketing solution. That's a business problem. Go find somebody to help you. And to come back and they go, we can't find anybody. Can you do it? So we started doing it.
Interesting.
What we found, we then started a thing called the garage. Originally, we'd had these different sectors in the agency. We had the playpen, the garage, the garden. And these are all kind of about an ethos of developing ideas, growing ideas and all that. Sounds a bit cheesy now. I mean, when we started the agency 14 years ago, that was a cliche of the time, complete with a pool table and a pinball machine. And we had it all. And sofa days and headache Friday, all the stuff that was gimmicky. And we had the garage had been the one that we set up and called that. That was like Steve Jobs when he started Apple in the garage. And quite a lot of things like Harley Davidson and starting garages. So we called it the garage. We called it the Garage Innovation Lab, and we turned that into our business advisory bit. And ironically, it was all the creatives that were good at this turned out to be the dyslexics. So we thought, oh, this is quite good. And we started getting quite busy on it. So, advising people on a more business level, almost a management consultancy level. And so we thought we'd better get some more people. So we put an advert out saying, picture of Steve Jobs saying only dyslexics should apply. Oof. And the ad went absolutely viral. It was in also lots of papers and started in The Guardian.
Are you even allowed to put an ad out that says that? In terms of employment law?
Had I said no dyslexics, I would have got sued. But actually, reversing it was okay. The law doesn't.
Really? Okay.
So it started that debate as well. And we had over 1,000 people came knocking on our doors. I discovered only recently that's almost anybody does a presentation on business and dyslexia in America has that slide in there of that ad.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, the first time anybody ever advertised for dyslexics. And to be honest, things went very well until really we had the recessionary period of COVID when everything went a bit crap. And then what came out of that was we went very quiet. I got a phone call from a guy called Nigel Lockett, who's a professor of entrepreneurism at Strathclyde University. Yes. He said, I've just been reading up about Garage. What's happening with that? I said, well, to be quite honest, come COVID, we've kind of suspended it and most people have moved on. So looking at reuniting it probably soon. He said, well, have you thought of maybe changing the idea, maybe bringing in bigger, heavyweight people and making it more like a group of heavyweight dyslexics and other neurodiverse people. And that's what then became effectively a different model, which became Diversity Lab. Yes. So Diversity Lab became this collection of, there's about just over 40 odd people involved and other groups who were involved with, like Dyslexia Disruptors in Holland.
Yes.
And we've been actually talking to Octopus Movement as well.
I want to park Diversity Lab for a minute and come back to it later on. But what I want to circle back to before we come back to Diversity Lab is, as you alluded to earlier, being a director at Saatchi & Saatchi. Now, I understand how dyslexia works in the lower levels, particularly with advertising, creative industry. But now you're up to this really, really senior level. And I've not worked at director level yet in my career. So in my mind, it's a lot less of a creative thing at that point. How do you apply dyslexic thinking to somewhere so senior?
Well, it's interesting because although, you sit on board meetings and you've got a lot of neurolinear thinkers sitting around the room. You've got your HR, you've got your financial director. You find your managing directors tend to be big picture thinkers, so they're a bit more imaginative. CEOs tend to be a little bit less so. But a lot of the other people in charge of those roles who are sitting on the board are often very neurolinear or neurotypical.
Right.
So you're the only creative in the room usually. What is the problem is that when they see any problem, and a lot of board meetings about dealing with two things. One is growth and the other is solving problems. So, obviously the main aim is you've got to grow the business. And then the problems you have to solve is, we're spending too much money or, this isn't working properly. And so you tend to find that the shout out you'd get from the more neurolinear or neurotypicals would be very linear thinking. It would be like, and you'd be saying, no, hang on a second, you're not looking at this in a bigger picture. You could be doing this. Just
to clarify, neurolinear and neurotypical, is that the same kind of terminology for the same kind of thinker?
Neurotypical is a term that's tend to use for what I call ordinary thinkers.
Yeah.
Linear are people that are even more linear thinking. They tend to be very narrow thinkers.
Right. Okay.
We often call them two-dimensional thinkers. They tend to think in a very dimensional way, in a very linear way. Where when you talk about neurodiverse thinkers, we tend to think in a more dimensional way. We'll see three possibilities. They see one. They see a single line pathway or zigzag and going in and out around circles and literally a black hole. So I'd find that actually the value you brought to the board was that firstly our ability to see the problem in many ways, but also to solve the problem in new ways. And a lot of some of the really good ideas that actually came out at the time, I was feeding a lot of really good thoughts in and then developing them with other people that were quite innovative and very interesting. Rather than what I felt was a little bit corporate in its approach. And we tried to change that corporate structure a bit to make it a little bit more open and just challenging preconceptions. So in a way, although I was the maverick on the board, and the famous management consultant Tom Peters says you should always have a maverick on the board, I think the difference between being a dyslexic is rather than being a maverick that just challenges and disrupts, you challenge, disrupt, but you find the solutions.
Yeah,
you take people to a better place. So there were a couple of big problems, including a financial problem, which I managed to solve, and nobody'd seen it in the way that they'd seen it. By looking at it a different way, we were able to see it and go, wow, actually, that solves the problem. one example was under our owners at the time, Cordian, we were under pressure to cut a lot of staff because we were way over. So my solution, which I teamed up with a couple of other people, we had a dyslexia think tank, by the way. I created a little think tank of dyslexics. And we came up with the idea of saying, well, instead of letting people go, why don't we see who wants to work 4 days a week? And we use the fifth day as that. We'll say, we'll agree to that if you use the fifth day to cultivate your talent.
Right. Okay.
So we'll get behind talent. So we wanted to be that we were going to talent cultivate by allowing people to work 4 days a week. And most people could afford to work on 4 days a week. That would pay their bills. But the fifth day could develop a talent. It might be one girl was a fashion designer. One girl wanted to do massage, actually. Someone else wanted to do the photography. So when we put this survey to the staff, it was like everyone loved it. I still go to work in the agency. I still get 4 days of salary. And I get 1 day off to do my specialism. And the agency will back you on some of that.
Oh, okay.
If you do something, we give you PR support, we might give you other support in any ways, but we wanted to see that we were cultivating this creativity in our staff, which actually is quite a good PR spin. And we took it back to the board, and the board said, brilliant, this is fantastic, this is great. We don't have to just fire people randomly. It means we keep the talent within the business. Most people we reckon would do as much in 4 days as 5. And the problem is that when you just take people out randomly, it's like, taking the bricks out, suddenly the wall falls down.
Yes. Yeah.
And everyone thought this was really innovative. And I'd also had the idea that we should take one of the offices we had at the beginning downstairs and put an outside entrance and start a coffee bar, because coffee bars make a lot of money. And we could have an interaction with people coming to coffee bars, and we could use them as test beds. So a lot of these very innovative ideas. And the board loved it, but the accountants from the mother company, Cordian, just came in and didn't want an A.
No.
They just literally picked names out of a hat and said, go. And that just destabilized the whole business, because you take out key players.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, they're on 60 grand, that's fine. Yes, but that guy is really important. Oh, get rid of that person there. Yeah, but she's really important.
Yeah, there's a reason they're paid that kind of money.
Yeah, people did this. They completely wiped out everyone over 60K at one point. And my brother was in that list. And they just took out all the talent and replaced it with cheap juniors.
Yeah.
So I think I discovered at that level you can contribute a tremendous amount to board thinking, because you've got a broad thinking base. You just see things in new ways, and I do quite a lot of that now. I do quite a lot of consultancy around businesses, and I work with 4 NED startups, and that's what I'm doing most of the time. Is I'm looking at solving their problems and looking at their business. I've run 4 businesses, so I kind of know how to run a business. So you have that
lots of practice.
I do, but I never do the finance. To keep me away from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think dyslexic thinking often people associate it with creativity, but actually it's enormously important in business as well. I mean, look at Richard Branson, good example.
Yes. And I think your example there as well with touching on you don't do the accounting, you're there as, say, the maverick on the board with your dyslexic thinking, but you also then put other people up in these senior positions who bring other things to the table. So by the end of it, you've got a rounded board team in theory.
Yes, good balanced team. And it's like, if you ever get involved with psychometric profiling, which is used in a lot of big companies, it's all about finding the right mindsets and the right talent to do a job. So if you've got a project, which is, say, new NPD, new product development, you're going to put a different team on that. Then you've got someone who's trying to, resort out your logistics. Yeah. You need those kind of big picture thinkers like us, people who see things in new ways to solve problems. But then sometimes you don't need us. You don't want us in finance. But then when we have our big picture ideas, we need people who are going to put the wheels on the bus and make it roll down the road. So we need quite neurotypical people to work with us. And I never have a problem with that. And I think being dyslexic or a bigger picture thinker, you understand why some people don't see things quite the way you do. The problem is that people who think in 2 dimensions don't see 3 dimensions.
Yes. It's really hard sometimes to explain an idea to somebody who's seeing it, as you say, in 2D.
It's like there's a book called Flatlands, which I recommend everyone looks at. It's really great. It's published in Victorian times by, I think the guy was a mathematician and a priest, I think.
Oh, blimey.
And it was trying to explain the idea of dimensionalization. So he starts with a story of something living in a 2-dimensional world, then in the 3-dimensional world. And the 3-dimensional world character only ever appears when it goes through the plane that the 2-dimensional world lives in. But the 2-dimensional world cannot, because it's like on a flat plane of paper. It can go anywhere on that flat plane of paper, but it can't go up and down. But when the 3-dimensional comes through that, it's only when it's that one slice of the up and down that the other character can see it.
Yeah.
And then you can go to fourth dimensions, fifth dimensions, and it goes into this whole idea, when you get to the idea of 18 dimensions. We just can't, as human beings, perceive beyond the 4 basic dimensions of 3 physical and 4 of time.
Yeah.
We can't think of how could there be another dimension beyond that. But you could understand that a 2-dimensional person couldn't see 3 dimensions. So there's no way of explaining it to them. So I do a lot of training now in trying to train clients and companies now into trying to think. It all came out of this need to get clients to be more broad-minded. We started these lectures in a way and these training courses to say, well, if we can make the clients a bit more open-minded, we can sell them better ideas. It makes better economic sense. It's a different approach. And we do try and get people who think more 2-dimensional to think more 3-dimensional.
Yeah. So that circles me back to Dyversity Lab. So you did the garage and you said, what? And somebody gave you the idea to spin it up to something with more senior thinkers in.
Yeah.
And you then founded Dyversity Lab. Who did you originally bring on board for that to sort of bring your team in?
Well, there's some amazing people I work with. Piers, for example, he's autistic. At this point, most of my associations have been dyslexic, and it was really interesting working with autistic people because I have to say, we all suffer from it. What people think dyslexia is rarely right. And I have to say, what I thought autism was wrong. And I have to say, good spanking for that because I had preconceptions. I'm sorry, they're formed by society and media. I see this horribly in HR departments, but I had a misconception about it. And yes, there is a spectrum, like there is with dyslexia. You have severe, mild, or in the middle. But there's a bit of spectrum on autism. It's a bit more complicated. But Piers is an amazing thinker. My God, it was like this guy's brain is just unbelievable. His ability to remember facts, he was like walking Wikipedia. But they have their strengths as we have our strengths, and working together has been great. We the first big project we worked with, and we had a few other people join us, Charlotte and Dr. Helen Taylor, who's amazing. She's been the whole evolution of dyslexia, as you know, and quite a few other people, Jim. And the first thing we worked on was actually for anti-slavery, charities about trafficking. And I think it was great to go in there and give them some very fresh thinking and fresh ideas and looking at things. There's always 2 stages. One is looking at things from a fresh point of view, which is what we're very good at. And the second is solutions that you haven't seen before. I used in a lot of my lectures the idea of dice theory, which says if you hold a dice up, the maximum number of faces you can see is 3. But there's 6. When we often ask people to have ideas, commonly you get 3 ideas. And that's the common bit you can see. So I always say to people, look for the 3 you can't see, but they're there. And if you push most people to go to 6, that's when you tend to get more creative leaps and bounds. Yeah. But most people will stop at 3, and that's the obvious, And we did it was great working together because you've got a very different mix of mindsets looking at things in quite different ways. And that was really electric. It was very, very stimulating. And so, that's been a very exciting sort of project to be working on. We're now looking around for our next big project to do because we said we want to use our ability to think difference to make a difference in the world. Yes.
I was going to ask you about its mission. So how do you find projects? Are you actively looking at them? How did the slavery project come to be?
That really came through a wonderful organisation called Marketing Kind, I'm a member of, because my other big specialism in marketing is ethics. I wrote a book on it called Ethical Marketing and New Consumer, and I'm a member of a group called Marketing Kind, and we are basically all people in the ad industry who are very socially conscious. So we tend to work with charities and groups that are very much into the space of socially conscious, less environmental, more socially conscious, the SEs. And we met them through them, and I picked it up and I put it to the group and said, who'd like to work on this? And everyone said, this is brilliant, love to work on this. But we have worked on technology for aerospace. We worked on a education system, which is in China. And so we've been contributing. Rather than going into the whole project, we go in and do our bit in the middle, summarize the brief. We come and give loads of ideas. Then we kind of walk away.
Okay.
So we did a bit of a power think tank, really. We have been having a conversation with management consultants because that's one thing they lack terribly is thinking.
Do they?
They're accountants. But interesting enough, EY has, for 7 years ago, they started a thing called the Centre of Excellence, which employs mainly autistic and some dyslexic people.
Yes.
The higher ticket thinking project. You go in there and you can pay more money to have them work on your project.
Can you? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I need to find somebody for EY to be a guest, I think.
Link you up, actually.
Thank you.
And they're very interesting because they've now expanded that from Texas now to about 8 different countries. And they're establishing one in England at the moment. And it is because I think they realise that to deliver the next stage on, which they're trying to get onto, is that they need the creative bit. And up to now, management consultants have survived without being creative. And that's why they're buying ad agencies up, and digital agencies. And they're trying to move into advertising and marketing. Their next big thing they're going to take over is advertising and marketing. And the problem is that if you buy an agency up, a creative agency, and you're a management consultant, they all leave. The good people leave, which is what's happened.
Oh, I see. Yes, because it's growth by acquisition, but you've got to understand what makes the thing you've just bought tick.
Yeah. Who wants to work for an accountancy firm? Now, so actually, the approach I always said is instead of using the word creativity, use the word thinking, because actually, if you hire thinkers in, that's really what they need. It's not strictly what I call creatives. They're not necessarily they're looking for problem solving. They're looking for clever solutions to business problems. You're not going to get that out of someone from a creative department of an ad agency. That's like going and asking a painter. What you want are thinkers, which are more strategic thinkers. And creatives do break down into very creative, strategic thinkers and very imaginative creatives. So you get those that are very artistic, very good at making things look wonderful and being very artistic. Then you've got those who actually are very clever at the strategy side, So there is quite a difference between the kind of creatives you see in agencies. And that's really the ones that work well in business, the ones that are more creatively strategic. So they're using their creative thinking abilities rather than their creative imaginations.
Yes. So that brings me on to your Think Like a Dyslexic program. So we've sort of briefly spoken to this before in our sort of pre-podcast prep. And it sounds like a training course that basically you're trying to get neurotypical or neurolinear people to apply a more dyslexic approach to their thinking. And I like the way it's very on the nose as well. Think like a dyslexic. How are you getting traction for that?
Well, it's interesting. I've run this past a few PR. I only did a soft launch on it so far to see what the reaction is. And I've had some interesting mixed ones from HR. America, a much more positive reaction from people in America, because in America, dyslexia is very associated with entrepreneurism. So it's a bit like saying think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting enough, I'm just pitching for a big session with a big company abroad, and we're using this to pitch to do the training session for them because they are looking for intrapreneurism, which is the big trend. And they want people to
define what that is.
Intrapreneurism is encouraging staff within your companies to be more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, yes, I remember that.
They want them to leave and set up a rival. And it sort of has its bouts of trendy. It was quite trendy about 10 years ago. It's become very trendy now with the recession. And therefore, what we found out talking to both management consultants, looking at a lot of data and talking to big companies, we found out that what people are looking for is they want to get more thinking power out of their people. So, middle management are terrible. Middle management are that group of people that sit there and they don't do anything. They just process. And if you look at the structure of companies, when people go in, it tends to be much more fluid at the beginning, and then they get to middle management. And middle management is by far the most linear, rigid, process-driven part of a business. And that's the point, by the way, most dyslexics leave. And they go on. And that's when they lose that talent. And of course, that talent isn't there a couple of years on, but they need it for senior management. So there's a lot of people talking about, cultivating the talent within we do a bit of that, talent within, you've got a dyslexic person, how to cultivate that. And I said, well, hang on, aren't we missing a big gap here? It's all very well sort of, putting dyslexics or autistic people on a pedestal and saying, here's a great person at technology, here's a great person at creativity. What about the senior management is more concerned with the other 80 people? Yeah, not the 20 people like that. They won the other 80. So I talked to a few CEOs and they said, well, actually, I'd be more interested if you could train the people that aren't clever thinkers. Could you make them think better? Could you make them think? Because we've got I got 40 management consultants. I got 40 people in my middle management, and none of them think. And I had a very good traction from the head of sales who's got 50 people. And he says, I would so want to put them all on a course like that because for sales, it's going to make them better salespeople. So we've had a lot of very positive feedback. The negative feedback is someone said, dyslexia, that's a problem. I wouldn't really want to encourage our staff to have reading and writing problems.
That is,
I said to this person, think you need to go on an unconscious bias.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Someone said, oh my God, I wouldn't want them to be chaotic. I said, wow, your attitude towards dyslexics is so negative.
That is
the course actually brings together 3 training programs we've been doing for many years, most of which have been developed initially because we realized that, I'll give you a little bit of a background on this. If you're running an agency, if you get a brief and you crack the brief and you sell the idea first time, you make money. If you don't crack it the first time, you've got to go back and redo it. You're going to go break even. If you do it a third time, you're going to lose money. So the economics of agency is tough. You've got to get it right first time. The problem you can't predict is the client who is narrow-minded, neurolinear thinker who looks at an idea and goes, oh, that's a bit scary, or I just want to say the facts. So we realized the best way to improve our economics and therefore reduce the cost of having rejection was to go and offer some free training to our clients and say, look, as part of the deal, we'll do some training and we train the clients to be more open-minded, to see the value of things. And that created various different courses. And I've just got dragged into doing more and more courses, which I love doing. So we created one called Birdcage, which is about the realization that what often holds us back is not our lack of creativity, it's what is holding back creativity. So there's a little story about a kid who's got a bird and he says to his dad, how can I teach my bird to fly? And then dad says, I don't know, son. So he goes to the uncle and he says, uncle, how can I teach my bird to fly? He just sits in the cage on the bar all day long. So I don't know, son. And he goes to the grandfather and he says, grandfather, how can I teach a bird to fly? And he said, it's easy. And he just opens the door and the bird flies out. The only thing stopping it from flying is the cage. And it's the same with your mind. So often our minds are in cages. So we help remove those barriers. And the second one was dimensional thinking, which is getting people to think more from 2D to 3D. So they understand different methodologies and ideas will help them think in a broader, wider way. And there's some really good techniques we use in that. And then the third one is Flip, which is the key of what my new book is going to be when it comes out next year.
Yes.
Which is getting you to look at things in a different way. And when I first announced I was writing this, I got 2 gigs straight away, one in Iran. Would you like to come and do a workshop in Iran about this? I said, yeah, I'd love to. He said, it's 2 days and you've got 70 CEOs. What?
Wow. Keep you busy.
I tell you, I was thrown into the deep end. So I went over to Iran. I've been there before. It's a great place. And I had and CEOs in Iran are very high end. They're highly trained and they don't suffer fools. So I had 2 days of trying to teach these guys to think differently with some workshop exercises, which were good fun, lots of lecturing. And I had 9 o'clock start, 5 o'clock finish, 2 50-minute breaks and a 45-minute lunch. Non-stop, no assistant. And it was translated on the fly as well into Farsi. So I got to the end of the first day and I'd gone through 2/3 of my material, not half, but 2/3. So I didn't have enough material for the next day. And I thought, oh, Christ, I better write some more. And they said, oh, we're taking you out for dinner tonight. I was like, really? So I went out to dinner and came back at 11 o'clock at night and sat down till 4 in the morning, writing another half of the presentation. And it went down an absolute storm. And it was, the best part was this woman who was head of a big pharmaceutical. There's a lot of women there, actually. I was surprised me, a lot of CEOs. So women. She was the head of a pharmaceutical company. She said, we had all the management consultants in. He said, but I've learned more in 2 days than I've learned from them in 6 months.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
you can't work. Yeah, but you can't work for companies in Iran because it's illegal. Because there's a sanction on trading.
Oh, is there? Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, the management consultants do because they do it through Turkey and things like that. But so it's a real shame, actually. Could have picked a lot of business up. But it was a very good experience, but it also helped me actually put a lot of the ideas we had for Flip. And the Flip originally came a lot earlier on when we was at Sarches, and we had this client who was an absolute awful client. I mean, really, really bad. And I'd been watching this program, this sort of drama, a bit like Homeland, where they'd flipped somebody, a spy. I came in next day and said, well, if you can flip a spy, why can't we flip a client? How would we do that? So we sat around and we discussed how we could flip somebody. But when you take that frame, it's like often if you put something in a new frame, you can look at it in a different way, which is part of what we teach in some of our sessions. And that led us to a whole load of ideas about how we could flip. And that then grew later on into a program, which now then I revamped into what has become the book. And a lot of it's about making people think in different ways and look at things in different ways. A lot of it's perspective, seeing. And so we put the 3 together. And that's when we created what was going to be, essentially, it was going to be a sort of just high-end thinking. I said, no, let's just be really radical and think like a dyslexic. And you love what you think. It's going to be Marmite. But, I don't don't need 500 clients, we need 5, so
yes, yeah.
We're all polarized.
Yeah, why not? And yeah, just to clarify, the book is Flip, Unconventional, Unthink Everything You Know. It's the tagline. And when will that be released?
That's hopefully coming out in February.
Okay.
The tagline that is rethink how you think about thinking. And it definitely does that. I do a lot of public lecturing, and I've always made all lectures kind of have a sort of a certain approach. And there's always been, in the first minute, you've got to make your audience think. If you can do that. There's a lovely story, actually, I picked up recently from someone who was interviewing this consultant in America, who's a top consultant in management consultancy. And the guy said, "What makes you so successful?" He said, "Well, to be honest," he said, "all management consultants do the same thing. We're 99% process, the same. Wherever you go to, you get the same. Same with that agencies." He said, "But what makes the difference is that when I meet a client, I spend more time on the first question I'm going to ask them. I ask them a question they can't answer instantly, but will have to think about. One that makes the client look at you and go, you know what? I don't actually know the answer to that, but I would like to know the answer." He said, that's what I win every piece of business on. And, I think he's probably dyslexic, but that power of the question that makes you think, the power of making people go, "I've never seen it that way before. I never thought of it that way." And that's kind of what we try and do, over the period of the training, which is going to be 3 half-day sessions of a lecture. We're going to hopefully people go away with not only having seen things differently and experienced it, but actually with enough of a toolkit, they can carry that through into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. Can you slightly humour the engineer in me who likes the mechanics of things? If I'd signed up for your training course and turned up and assume I don't think like a dyslexic, which clearly I do, what would I expect to happen when I'm sat there in the hall ready for your course to start?
Well, it's a combination of 3 things. There's a certain amount of narrative because I think there's a lot of stories to tell and a lot of interesting examples we can pull up. So it's creating firstly the context and the mindset. You have to create firstly sort of an atmosphere for learning and an atmosphere for open-mindedness. So it's very important to teach that quite early on. So you've got to grab people's attention, start to make them think about things in ways that are different. And then we have a series of exercises they can do, some of which are very fun, actually. There's a lovely one involving a Fanta can and survival for life, which we do in team groups.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's another one called Picasso line exercise, which is working at how teams can work together to see things.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. We get people to, for example, but they have a pen and they have to follow like a sort of, those machines, has your heartbeat on it. And a long piece of paper, and we play a bit of music, which is quite unique music. And it's based on a thing that when someone said to Picasso, "How do you draw?" He said, "I don't, I just take a line for a walk."
Okay.
You take this line for a walk responding to the music, and then, that was a squiggly line, looks like something's come off a heart monitor. And then we pass that to another person and say, "What do you see?" It's a squiggly line. Okay, now look deeper. And when we get them to look at that squiggly line, after a while, they start to see images. And we give them a pen and they turn the image around in lots of ways. And you will not believe the amazing things that come out of that every time. I've done that about 100 times. And people see, obviously, faces. They see landscapes. They see a lot of fish for some reason. I don't know.
Popular.
It goes back to the reptile in us. And people are sitting there going, because we always ask people, how imaginative do you think you're creative? And most people are not very, because people have a low self-esteem on creativity. And that's because they've been told not to. And they come out going, wow, I never realized this is amazing. And you find out that even taking something as random as that, you can make people very creative. And it's a very rewarding exercise. We do a lot of those kind of fun exercises. I don't tend to do the ones where you got to build a tower out of cardboard toilet rolls and drop an egg from the top, I don't do those ones. And I don't do playing in sand with Lego either.
Oh, okay.
You've got to understand that I think at 7 years old, someone did a thing that said we're like 82% creative and original. But by the time we've been through school, college, and the first year of corporate America, we're only down to about 2%.
Yeah.
But, throwing people back into a classroom isn't the answer. That's why, in fact, Birdcage is a lot about that, is how to release. In many cases, people haven't lost their creativity. They've suppressed their creativity.
Yes.
Behind those barriers. If you remove those barriers, they tend to... One thing we do in companies as well, which is the yellow card, which is you give your staff a yellow card and you say... Because one of the big things is fear and risk and responsibility in people. We live in a very risk-averse... We don't live in risk management. We have risk aversion now. and people don't want to take any risks. And in any company, there's 85% of problems in companies are never, ever solved, according to Baines. Of the 15% that are dealt with, which are the bigger ones, only half of those are ever solved properly. So all these little problems don't get solved because nobody feels empowered to do it. And if they were empowered, they'd be more creative, they'd solve problems, things would run better. So we do this thing called the yellow card, where we give all the staff a yellow card. It's a get out of jail. It says, this is the play that you are doing something you think will benefit the business. It might require taking a risk, but we give you permission to take risks. We give you permission to empower yourself. You see a problem, fix it. Don't go and ask somebody or send an memo, just fix it. Yeah. If you see something can be done better, do it. And it's scary for very neurolinear management, but they very quickly understand why it has a value. When you empower your workforce to start using their minds, to think, to solve problems, to come up with better ways of doing things, amazing things happen. And nobody ever gets, very rarely does anyone make a mistake. And rarely do they need to play the card, but the card gives them permission. Yeah. And it says as an endorsement, you can take risks. Most people think they're not allowed to, and nobody's even said that. So we do a lot of this stuff of trying to get people to understand that. Then, we're not trying to turn people into artists, and nobody's going to come out actually being dyslexic. I'm afraid it's not that easy, but it will make you think a lot better.
Yes. You're not going to suddenly make a load of dyslexics, and take the fun away.
Who wouldn't like a Henry Ford or Richard Branson or a James Dyson, or Einstein working in the middle management?
Well, and if you only had to do a 2.5-day course to turn everybody into that, wow.
It's quite simple. It's not super, super expensive. I mean, like some courses are. It's very reasonable at the beginning. And, it's going to be good fun. It's something we've built on tried and tested techniques. I mean, some of it's been really years. So it's not like we just invented out of scratch. We know these things work. We know they change the way people think. And I've worked with a lot of levels from CEOs down to recruits. We also work in schools occasionally. We've got a school version of this. So it's very exciting, actually. And one thing that's quite fun at the moment is I'm just recruiting a few people to come and work with us on it, because it's a bit much to be doing 3.5 days in lecture just for one person. But I've got a couple of amazing people, one of which is a great guy. He ticks a lot of boxes, actually. HR would love him because he ticks his ethnic minorities, gay and dyslexic,
Right.
Okay. And a single dad. And he's an actor.
Oh, wow. So
you see HR going tick, 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 tick,
To deliver this course, would it have to be dyslexic people to deliver it, or do you think somebody who isn't dyslexic could possibly deliver it out of curiosity?
I don't see necessarily. I mean, my brother does a lot of courses as well, and he's not dyslexic. I think the only thing is, I don't think in this case it's that critical. You have to be dyslexic, because I think, in a way, when we looked at things, for example, like getting involved with cultivating talent within, which is people like Lexic do, who go in and they help people who might be dyslexic or autistic to develop their talent within the business rather than suppressing it. Because a lot of dyslexics do suppress their talent.
Yes.
That's a very different ballgame. And I think you do need to have an understanding to do that. I also think that a lot of companies going in talking about neurodiversity are doing more damage than good. I was talking to an HR person the other day, and they sent me the document that had been sent by their HR consultant. So a lot of these big companies have external consultants. And of course, HR consultants are very good. They do a lot of stuff that HR don't do. They do a lot of training like unconscious bias and all this, health and safety, But I actually figure that most of them haven't got a clue about neurodiversity. And what shocked me was it was a lot of old-fashioned, outdated assumptions. It started with the word disability rather than looking at disability, which is a term they use more in America now.
Yeah.
It started with words, prejudice. I mean, it doesn't help that some of the words are negative. I mean, when we were at school, we talk about special needs, learning difficulties. As one teacher said, a Senko teacher said, we don't have learning difficulties, we have teaching difficulties. We try and teach everybody the same. You get ADHD. So I was classified as hyperactive at school, but now I'm attention deficit hyperactive disorder.
Yes.
My hyperactivity is now a disorder.
Yes. But it's not, is it? Because like the dyslexia, the hyperfocus, if you can direct it in the right way, gives you a huge advantage at points.
Well, I'm saying when I wrote my book, Ethical Marketing and the New Consumer, I've been doing a lot of lecturing. So it's easy enough because, PowerPoints are easily set up when you're dyslexic. And I collect a lot of information. And then Wiley's came to me and said, look, we've got a couple of books published on this, but they're a bit too academic. We'd like something a bit more popular. We read a lot of your blogs. I was writing the blog for on ethical marketing for Brown Republic, so I can write 1,000 words quite easily. But I think one thing I like being dyslexic is you can, once you got all the ideas in your head, you can just, it kind of flows. You sort of like you surf your way on all the waves and you come out the other end. And it's just, it all comes connected. So I knew I could write 1,000 words quite easily. But when I started doing the book, I realized that I'd taken on too much. And my friend said, Chris, you're dyslexic. You shouldn't be writing books. Okay, rubbish.
No.
Anyway, I met this girl who said, have you tried chunking? I said, what's that? I said, well, basically, how much time can you hyperfocus for? I said, well, I've trained myself to about 3 hours. Okay, hyperfocusing is good. I said, how much can you write in 3 hours? I said, well, 1,000 to 3,000 words. Okay, break the book into 3,000 words. Break the chapters into sub-chapters and then do just hyperfocus sessions. And so I did a lot of planning, worked with a girl called Sarah, who's amazing, who helped edit things together. She did all my editing afterwards. And we got all the information that I wanted to build into the solid facts, the case studies, and then my thoughts. And what we did is we then put them into folders. So then I went to Spain, because you need to be away from the internet. And I my wife would go out at 8:30 and come back at 1. And I'd sit down at the computer and I open the folder, read all the notes. Okay, that's what I'm going to put in. These are my thoughts. And I just sit there and write. And what amazed me, in 10 days, I wrote 100,000 words.
Wow. That is some effort.
Even I can't remember that. Yeah, that was amazing. I was writing 10,000 words a day.
Yeah.
My poor editor had a hell of a job trying to get through it every day. It takes longer to read than write. The good thing was it was actually quite structured. She said, it didn't need a lot of rewriting. There wasn't a lot of repetition. It kind of worked. So I now teach that to a few people how to do it. And it's a great way of doing it. And I got that point where I had that massive crisis of confidence, where you think, oh my God, I'm going to do this. Why have I taken this on? The publisher's nagging me. Where am I delivering the book? I've hyped the book up. There's a point I felt, you get that imposter syndrome, where you think, what was I even thinking? Discover me. Let me sending people around to my house. By the book, please. And it was, thank God I had that fortuitous meeting that taught me how to do it. And now, what I've been doing with Flip, actually, I've been writing in PowerPoint slide format.
Oh, interesting.
I can do a little bit every time, and I'll just do sessions where I'll write 30, 40 pages.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that we've got so many pages, it got to suddenly, because we rewrote it, we were on our third rewrite, because each time we keep changing it. So originally when we wrote the first thing, I said, no, this is too predictable. It's too obvious. This is kind of like every other boring book. We need to do this in a different way. And in the end, we looked at Paul Arden's book, actually. I thought that was a really simple way of doing things. And I said, well, why don't we do it like I would a PowerPoint? I'd have a really good statement and then I'd talk about it. And all these are thought-provoking statements. And we've got to about 365 slides, basically. I thought, well, in that case, why don't we do this as 365 pages? And then we'll do a app and you can download one every day.
Nice. Oh, nice.
And the other thing we did do is we looked at a lot of books, and as most people know, business books don't make a lot of money. There's not many big selling business books. A good business book is about 20,000. I think my book sold about 12,000. And there's good marketing money. And so there's a few people like Seth Godin and a few others do make a lot of money, but most of the money is made from the spin-offs. So we actually looked at all the books that have been successful, Eat Big Fish and all that, and we looked at where the money was. The money is rarely in the publishing, it's in the spin-offs. So we looked at all the spin-offs, mapped them all out, and said, okay, let's work the other way around. The book is really just the marketing piece, So we looked at lectures, training courses, paid podcasts, all that. And we just said, okay, well, let's try and write something that works for all this. And that's why we revamped it. So we basically flipped the thing on its head and did to our very book what we were preaching other people to do. Nice. And that methodology has worked really, really well. And a lot of the time now is actually fact checking and permission checking and all that, which takes months to get permissions and pictures and all that. So even when you've got your script, you sit there for months having it all, make sure you don't get sued the moment you publish.
Yeah. That wouldn't be a good place to be, would it?
There's a famous stories of people going to print too quick and finding out that you only print something you thought was harmless, and suddenly someone's got you for defamation of brand.
Yes, I've seen a few things pop up in the media recently for various people who've done that.
Lawyers out there want to make the money.
Oh, yes. So what I'm going to do is start winding up the podcast now. Now, every guest in this podcast gets asked 3 rapid-fire questions from me. They are quick questions from me, but they don't need quick answers from yourself. So let's dive in with question number 1. What prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
Well, obviously, having gone through the before dyslexia, I did think that basically we were all illiterate and that we all ended up in prison.
Yes.
But it turns out that statistic is based on fairly thin evidence.
Is it?
Since it was first established based on 325 prisoners in 2 jails that, by the way, were not actually diagnosed as dyslexic, just were considered they might be. So that has perpetuated a repetition of that study that tends to come up with similar answers. But I always thought, the danger is I could end up in prison.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Not good. Okay. Question number 2. If an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
I don't think I'd need to, because they know what it's like already.
You reckon?
Well, if you're an alien and they're going to be a super race, they're going to be smart, far smarter than us. They're not going to be neuralinear, that's for sure.
Fair enough. Okay, well, the final serious question for me on the podcast. And for the answer to this question, you're not allowed to use your own stuff as the answer. And seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show, what is your favourite dyslexia life hack?
Ooh, oh my God, that's a tough one. That requires some real thinking. I might be blank on this one. Depends on how you define life hack as well, honestly. What I would call life hack is being dyslexic is usually, think of the Post-it note.
Think of the Post-it?
The Post-it note, yeah, because the Post-it note is without a Post-it note, I'd be absolutely chaotic.
Oh, I see. Have you got like one of these monitors that's decorated Post-it notes?
Yeah, I've got one in front of me. Sometimes I have to take the Post-it notes off the monitor to actually see the computer.
See the computer screen, yes.
I've got a spare screen here and it's just covered in Post-it notes. And I have Post-it notes in the bathroom, in the kitchen. I have them inside cupboards.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes, it's like, remember this, for example, podcast at 1:00.
Yes.
And I use my phone now as reminders. My memory is so abysmally bad. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. I don't know if you use Post-it notes because I used to work somewhere that banned them, but I put stuff deliberately in places that jog my memory. Oh, it's in a different place. Oh, yes, I need to do this.
I have to say, having a bad memory is probably the one curse. And people say, what is your curse? And I go, there's not many. Yes, it's reading and writing is not so much a problem nowadays with technology. But I have to say the memory. I met a couple at an event the other week, and I had no record of ever meeting them before. And apparently, I met them 6 times.
Wow! Oh, that's yes, yeah. The awkward conversation where you're trying to remember their name and stuff like that.
I remember when I bumped into a guy on a train station in Stratford. I knew his face. We went over and he sort of recognised us. We started chatting for a while. We chatted, and we actually said, because you have that pretend bit, you're thinking, oh, yes, we know each other, but we can't remember who each other is. And then I said, I'm just trying to place you where I know you from. And the guy said, West Hampstead Station. We get on the train at the big West Hampstead Station. I said, yes, that's right. I said, we don't actually know each other, do we? Oh, we do now.
Yeah, we do now.
It was such a funny twist because, we actually got to know each other. And then when we got on West Hampstead Station, we'd sort of say hello to each other and chat. And I think it was a doctor, actually. And, it was quite nice, actually, made a connection there. But, it is embarrassing, especially when someone walks up to you in the street and you have no recall who they are. You're fishing on you. Go, how are things? Anything interesting happening recently? Give me a clue.
Yeah. How are the kids? Do you have kids? Yeah.
No, I am not married.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, yes. Okay, well, before we sign off, where can people find you if they want to get hold of you? And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Usually I'm on LinkedIn under Dr. Chris Arnold. So Chris Arnold, you find a million Chris Arnolds. I've got a couple of websites, creativeorchestra.com, which is our main agency. We have also a Connect2, which is another agency we have, which specializes in community connections. And then there's Dyversity Lab, which is spelled with a Y, not an I. It's Dyversity Lab.com. and you can find us on there, or they can email you.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you.
Always happy to have a chat.
Yes. Thank you, Chris, for taking the time to come on the podcast today. It's been really fun talking to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
That's okay. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye for now.